Reading about your personal work with the Toronto General and Western Hospital Foundation, the Stratford Shakespeare Festival, and the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, among others, it is clear that you are someone who is passionate about giving back to the community. In business, we learn that a corporation's #1 responsibility is to create value for their shareholders. What do you think is the relationship between giving back to the community and shareholder value? From a corporate perspective, is there a real place for giving back given that it can result in resources being taken away from shareholder earnings?
At the end of the day, first and foremost, when you talk about giving back, and what you referred to was my personal giving back, but that is only enabled because my organization would allow me and let me loose to do what I wanted in that area. So first and foremost, that is the culture in an organization that is important, to allow you to dream big and to do what you want. Not only is there a responsibility to the corporation in terms of the reason why you've been hired to become an accountant, a lawyer, or whatever, but also allowing you to be your full being. And these are the type of things an organization thrives because of that. So an organization gets a lot back because they're allowing you to become a fuller person. I don't think there's a conflict between giving back and enhancing shareholders' value, because it depends on how you give back, what you give to, but there's always a return. Because I see giving back by a corporation not as philanthropy, but more as enhancing their brand, enhancing the market reach, etc. So I do not see a conflict in that.
This is a really good question. Do you see a conflict? I can understand it at Price Waterhouse. What about like a regular company that, she's right, costs dough. You want to get involved in corporate social responsibility? And I'm a shareholder. Why should they do it? I can understand Price Waterhouse, my firm.
So, and when you talk about PricewaterhouseCoopers or a law firm, and that's the thing I try and explain to a lot of these charities, that then at that time, when you're asking for PwC or a law firm, you're asking their partners to dole out some money from their personal pockets. Mm-hmm. When you go to a corporation, management is making the decision. They may give something from their own pockets, but the main money is coming from the corporation. And as Ralph says, but that is his money because he's investing in it. He has not made that decision. But he has empowered management to make decisions which are ultimately in the best interest of the shareholder, which is him, one of whom is him. And as I said, when you have empowered management, you've got to trust management when they are making decisions to give back. There is a return that is coming back in different forms, as I said, whether it be brand enhancement or that market outreach that happens. Look at what Rogers is doing today. Look at the amount of market reach that they are doing today. And if you're a shareholder in Rogers, you say, why are they doing that? Or why is Rogers giving money to an institution like this? But there's a huge amount of payback that comes back because you get there's brand awareness, you become aware of their products, and you therefore, so there are multiple things that do happen. And it ultimately does come back in shareholder returns.
Okay. Question from Elijah on social impact investing.
Canadian pension fund managers are reluctant to be part of social impact investing because they fear it will not meet their principle of fiduciary responsibility, which they hold their clients and shareholders. But with impact investing becoming more mainstream and with opportunities opening in this sector, pension funds have a significant amount of money that could be invested in social good and financial return. What strategies can be implemented to bring Canadian pension funds into social impact investing? Specifically, what policies can the government institute? And what risk management strategies can the fund administrators put in place to ensure they maintain their fiduciary responsibilities while engaging in social impact investments?
That's an interesting question. Now, for a moment, let me ask you, if you put your money aside and expecting a defined benefit at a point in time, then you have passed on the responsibility to the pension manager saying, I don't care what you do. I want to make sure that at the end of when I retire, I want X amount of money because you've been promised that through the whatever. So when you look at Canadian pension plans and where there are defined benefit plans, the responsibility is greater on them to ensure that they give you that return. Because if they don't, who's going to pay for it? It is going to be the future employees, future teachers, or future whoever is going to pay for your current returns. So, but social impact investing, I mean, one needs to understand that. I mean, first and foremost, I can understand that the teachers, the CPPIBs of this world are maybe hesitant in donating money or investing in something like maybe a call, because they would say they cannot do that. But if you go to them through a public-private partnership, and where they can still get an absolute return, they are not looking necessarily for super returns on everything. They're willing to play a socially important role. And Case recently recently announced about a year ago in Quebec that they're going to work with local government and local companies to invest together through public-private partnerships in areas where the social impact can be made. Now that social impact, A, does help the community at large, but it will give them some minimal return. And that is an absolute must for them. So social impact investing is happening. It may not be as obvious to us. It is maybe happening through public-private partnerships. It is not a significant part of the investment strategy maybe, but it is happening.
My question to you, work-life balance is something which PwC strives for, and you also strongly advocate. However, on further research, I found employees' feedback contrary to PwC's and yours rhetoric. On Glassdoor webpage, work-life balance is scored mere 2.8, which may not be an ideal score, being the lowest of all the other categories. On Indeed webpage, I found that out of the 5 different categories, namely work-life balance, salary benefits, job security, management and culture, work-life balance is scored 3.4, which was minimum among the aforesaid categories. Same was observed upon visiting Rate My Employer webpage, where work-life balance is scored 2 stars, which was again the lowest score. Feedback from employees, former and present, are the real reflector. What, in your opinion, can be the reasons behind such contradiction? Is PwC lagging in attaining its own stated goals?
Another great question in my view. But if I ask each one of you to take a piece of paper and write down what does work-life balance mean to you, and I can assure you I will get as many different answers as there are people. So work-life balance, first and foremost, must be defined by you. Just like I say, happiness is something which has to be defined by you. What is happiness to you? So, you know, a firm can only do so much. At the end of the day, firms like PwC empower its people. We give people flexible time in the sense that, yes, we have a goal to achieve. We have a deliverable to a client. But if you need to go for half a day, sometime in the afternoon, and do something personal, you're free to do it, as long as you understand the time frame in which the goal has to be delivered. Now, you can work the way you want. You can choose that, okay, in the daytime you want to do something. As long as 3 weeks later that goal is delivered, the deliverable is delivered to the client, that's fine. And my concern is, when we talk about work-life balance, A, it is not a consistent meaning. For Raj, I find work-life balance by doing things like this. And I find the time to do things like this because I love it. But to you, you might say, gee, I never did public speaking. I don't like standing in front of a crowd. It creates more pressure, and you might spend 10 hours trying to prepare for something like this. So it all depends. So to me, yes, I'm not saying PwC is perfect, but nor is any other firm, because work-life balance has to be thrown back into the hands of people. And we need to empower people to be fearless. We need to empower people to speak up, because if they cannot, nobody will help them if they don't ask. And I've always encouraged my people to, A, if there is some reason that they cannot deliver something because A, something is impossible or it's not fair that is being asked of them, they have to speak up. And to me, work-life balance can be found only by you, A, by defining what work-life balance is to you, what happiness is to you, and thirdly, by speaking up when you feel it is impossible to deliver something within a time frame that is set up for you.
I guess just to go off of that, basically my question is, with everything that you have going on, just for you personally, So I wondering if you could speak about how you balance your schedule and how you avoid burnout, which is so common in your industry and in other industries. And I was just wondering if you could speak about how you personally do it.
Alison, if I understood you correctly, and I may have not, but then correct me, please. What you are seeking from me is a response to how do I prevent burnouts in myself? That's number one. And number two, maybe I could say how it, if possible, within my staff too, okay? I'll try and address that. First and foremost, burnout for myself. Now, I've been in this country 28 years. And I think I don't recollect one day that I felt that I was burning out. Because I came here with a goal. I was very clear what I wanted of myself. There were a couple of events in my life, where I may recollect, where I felt a little amount of pressure, may not be the right word again, but that I needed to make sure that every minute of mine was appropriately utilized. And those two times were one when my 6-year-old daughter in 1992 suddenly caught a virus which we couldn't understand, was called the Guillain-Barré syndrome. Now, fortunately, Guillain-Barré syndrome can be brought back to normal. It is something that attacks the nerves. But I was also working at that time on one of my most difficult clients. I was spending every night at this client till about 12 o'clock, coming home at about 12:30 in the night, going back at about 5 or 6 o'clock because we used to teach. There was it's a public company, it had some time constraints. There were issues that we found that needed to be addressed before we could report. And at that time, resources are limited because you have planned your resources 4 months ahead, assuming that these type of problems may not be there. But I remember my daughter was in hospital, my wife was in hospital with her. I used to go in the afternoon so that I could spend a couple of hours, come back. So it's the point here is when you are very focused, you will find a way to get everything done. And I have always found one technique which I call meditation. Just sit back for 5 or 10 minutes, contemplate, let my mind cool down, and I find I can rejuvenate myself into not burning out. Coming to my staff, again, a person who's authentic, a leader who has empathy, who has a high IQ, will notice what is going around him. I cannot notice everything in my whole organization, which is 3,000 people in Toronto alone. But people who are working around me, I think I have high EQ. Did I say IQ before? I meant EQ. And I can sometimes see that somebody is not feeling right or something is not right with somebody, and I approach them and say, look, what's the issue? And sometimes they may say, I don't want to talk about it. You have to understand when you know how much you push, how much you don't push. So burnouts can only be avoided by each of us looking out for the other. It reminds me of another story. When I was in England, I went to a certain school, and there, in the evening, we had very formal dinners, where the gentlemen had to be in jackets and the women had to be in long dresses. And the food was laid out on the table, bountiful, but you could not take your own meal. You had to be served by your neighbor. So I was coming from Indian origin. Hospitality and making sure that you're looking after your neighbor is a big thing. So I was constantly making sure my neighbors are full, but nobody was asking me. So I had to just slip my hand and just make sure I was taking enough food for myself. The point here that I'm trying to make is look out for each other. There's a lot that you can get by looking out for each other, and you can avoid those burnouts and all the other things.
My question is just, so far we heard about so many financial scandals, starting from Enron and AIG and Madoff and Toshiba. So I can see the list keeps growing, and accountants are actually in a pretty awkward situation. We are trying to protect the investors, especially the public investors, and we want to protect ourselves, and also we want to keep our clients. So in your view, and what's the best accountants can do to balance all this kind of related and can be conflicting interests and protect their investments and ourselves?
This is a dilemma, a problem that the accounting profession has faced from time immemorial. More so, I can remember when I was training to be an accountant, there used to be called what is called the gap. Not gap, G-A-A-P, but GAP, which is the gap between what the public perceives is an auditor's responsibility as to what an auditor does compared to what they think he or she does. An auditor provides an opinion on the truth and fairness of financial statements where they are materially correct. That does not mean that every fraud is going to be discovered or everything is going to be, you'll be made aware of. Control issues also have been examined, but they are not reported upon, and therefore you'll see new standards are now coming up in the United States and here, and in the United Kingdom, they're already there in the United Kingdom and countries like India, where auditors are publicly required to also give an opinion on the controls. So how do we deal with that gap is the first thing. As long as the investors understand, A, what are the accountants giving? And the accountants, the auditors come once a year to give you an opinion on the financial statements at a point in time. Whereas you are getting quarterly reports from management on the basis of which you may make your investment decisions. There are many others involved, experts, analysts, etc., who evaluate the industry, evaluate the markets, and it is on that basis. So your decisions to invest or not to invest is not made on the basis of what the auditors are saying or on the basis of financial statements, because that is an after. So what an auditor does is gives you comfort that the information that you may have relied upon, on the basis of which you made an investment, and how that has turned out to be. So that's what an auditor is supposed to tell you. Now, yes, when you look at AIG, Bernie Madoff, Satyam, and all these organizations, absolutely, the profession is embarrassed about it. But you should also you're looking at 1% of those companies that the auditors failed. You're not looking at the 99% that they did fine in, okay? So you also got to understand when there's collusion, when there's and there's a lot of parties colluding to commit a fraud, nobody in the world, even the auditors, cannot. For example, what happened at Bernie Madoff? Confirmations were being received by the auditors from third parties that the investments existed or these things existed. But what had happened was Bernie was colluding with somebody else. And in such collusion, it's impossible for the auditor not to become a victim. So in my view, just as the investors are victims, an auditor also becomes a victim. I don't know if that answers your question, but going forward as to what are the various people doing, including the government, regulators, and the profession itself, what are they doing to enhance trust and transparency? So all these bodies have to work together. You saw the evolution of PCAOB in the United States, CPAB in Canada. These are bodies which were not there pre-Enron. They only came into being in the last 15 years. So it is coming together of all these institutions, ensuring that investor protection becomes the key. And what is extremely important is I believe the governments have failed. The governments have failed to put people behind bars. What happened on Wall Street in 2008, and Obama took over from Bush, that was a time when maybe Obama could have said, anybody who has get these institutions down for the last 5 years, I'm going to freeze their assets, freeze their transactions, make the CEOs pay for it. None of that happened. Okay, and this, by the way, whatever I'm saying are my views, not necessarily PwC's views. So this is how I feel. I do honestly believe that we have let people who have management who has committed fraud away, let them get away without the necessary convictions, etc., that should have happened to them.
Do you have a mechanism for whistleblowing? So I'm a young accountant at Pricewaterhouse, and I see something I don't like, but the managing partner on the file, that's a big client. He says, you know what, disregard those numbers. How do you deal with that?
And that has happened, there's no doubt, and whistleblowers, I mean, again, post-Enron, whistleblowing has been put into effect both at companies
I'm just talking
and
inside
firms like us,
Pricewaterhouse.
and firms like ours. I remember a young man, who's now a partner, disagreed with one of our senior partners at that time about the way he had resolved an issue. And in spite of numerous attempts by that partner, the senior partner did not see in the same direction. This partner came to me and I said, look, the best thing to do, we have a technical group. I said, take this, express your view, and both the partners will then be called to understand each other's position. So we do have that mechanism to prevent that from happening. But again, there's no guarantee that this will not happen again.
Hi, Raj. So many of us in this room are interested in consulting upon graduation. A common theme in our program, including last week during Integrative Week, was the advent of artificial intelligence coming into society and into the workplace. So although many of us probably thought AI was going to take over more repetitive jobs, say in manufacturing or in transportation, there's much research to suggest that AI will greatly affect the future of the consulting and also the auditing and accounting profession as well. So some research I did for another class suggests that AI will first take over the data analysis component of these types of jobs, and firms will eventually employ quant consultants or robo-advisors. And that data analysis being a large component of consulting and auditing, this will lead to consultants having to change their jobs and really learn new skills in order to be competitive. So what is a firm like PwC doing to prepare consultants and auditors for changing job responsibilities and the potential for the loss of their job?
Great question, Alex. It is a concern for all of us, but at the same time, it is a challenge for all of us. It's an opportunity for all of us. PwC started a program called Foundations for the Future some time ago, and some of you may be acquainted with that. This was actually a campus recruitment program for our consulting practice, where new joiners were provided the opportunity to not just learn one skill, but a variety of skills across a variety of industries, to make them true business advisors, to allow them to enhance the analytical thinking, the faculty of analytical thinking, etc. At the end of the day, artificial intelligence is also created by people, whether you like it or not. So to create artificial intelligent machines and etc., to do what you want them to do, to write the programs that you need people. So you still need, people can never be got rid of. Okay, let's be very clear about that. Yes, the mundane and the stuff. So in recently times, you may have heard that organizations like IBM, Accenture, PwC have created service delivery centers in Philippines, China, India, etc., where they're sending the grunt work out to those territories because our young kids don't want to do that work. And that is what is going to stop after some time because the machines can do that grunt work. But the work at the end, to be able to analyze, having received the analysis, what are the different scenarios that you would draw from it? A machine can't do that. A machine can only do what you have programmed it to do for you. Okay, so to me, PwC is constantly aware of the changing skills that are required to service our clients. We are constantly trying to train our people to address those new needs. And whether we are successful or not, time will tell.
Fired up. Somebody got a good question?
I think they're trying to restructure how accountants can record and report all these financial assets. And I think it's probably going to backfire because they're trying to remove the rights and the privileges to explain and establish the understanding of accounting as a business language from ordinary people. They're trying to take the rights only to accountants, and it's going to make things a little bit more complicated because a lot of things it's going to base down not disciplines and rules, but more like a modeling and assumptions. So I don't know if you think it's a good idea. And personally, I think it's going to backfire because they're reaching out to other people's professional territory. And I just want to see your opinion on this kind of changing.
Again, this is my opinion. It is being recorded, but I will still give you my opinion. It is not something that you want to go and publicize with the CPA, think, oh, this is what Raj said, or not necessarily something which you want to. My view is accounting is becoming more complex. I wish we could go back to the same old days when, say, cash is king, show me the money. But there's so much happening nowadays, and these international financial reporting standards are not only complex for the common man, not only complex, believe me, they're even complex for the accountants. It is not an easy transition to go to international financial reporting standards. These are standards which the Canadian Institute and the Canadian Securities Commissions has determined that they will adopt. And what we, therefore, as accountants and auditors have to do is to ensure that the reporting isn't happening in compliance with that. To be honest, the government or the regulator all could have said, we do not want to comply with IFRS, let us stay with the US GAAP or the old Canadian GAAP. But the decision is not in the hands of the auditors or the accountants. The decision has been made by the government, the securities regulators here, that that's the reporting they want to move to, and all we are doing is complying.
In your early career years, have you ever experienced any advantage or disadvantage related to being a visible minorities and a foreigner? How did you cope with it? Thank you.
That is good.
I love that question.
Good question.
So, give you a little background and a context. How much time? Yeah. I came to England to do my CA and my MBA, or to do my CA. I didn't know where I came, but I decided to do my CA when I came to England. After having done my CA, I was going to do an MBA in the United States, but I was persuaded by my firm in England to do an MBA in England on an executive program. Having done that, at the age of 29, I was told I would be the youngest ever partner and the first brown-colored partner in a blue-blooded English firm. So at the age of 30, 31, I would have been a partner in this firm. But I was in England on a work permit. And in England, at that time, converting work permit to a permanent resident was not easy, unless I bought my way as an entrepreneur on an entrepreneur visa, which I did not want to do. Though my family could afford it, I did not want to be dependent on my family. I had the world beckoning me, Australia, Middle East, Canada, USA. So I made a choice after all these countries to come to Canada. When I came to interview in Canada, I was conscious of the fact that I would have been the youngest brown-colored partner in a blue-blooded English firm. So I was pretty cocky and full of piss and vinegar at that time. So when I came and interviewed with some of these firms, including then Coopers & Lybrand, I said to them, is the color, I don't know how I got that courage, but I did say, is the color of my skin going to be an impediment in my being a partner in this firm? And I asked I was here for a couple of days, I asked all the firms that I interviewed with that question. And I tell you, each firm answered it well. I decided to join Coopers & Lybrand. So my first interaction was there. Having come here, I realized that I had to start all over again. So though I was a British CA, so one would say, okay, part of the Commonwealth. Okay, even India was part of the Commonwealth, but so you might say India does not have or did not have the same standards of training. Whether we agree with it or not is not the issue. But the point is, I was trained in England. I qualified as a British CA. I did my MBA, but I had to lose 5 years of my career and start all over again. Fine, I accepted that, much as I hated it initially. But I was a man with a focus. I had to do something. I knew I wanted to prove myself. And in my first 18 months, there were various obstacles. There were people who saw that I was ambitious, who saw that I would not wait to be told what to do, or take the bull by the horn and get things done. I'm a doer. So there were people who were jealous, so there were people of different people. I mean, there were people from brown-colored, yellow-colored, green-colored, all colored people were there who would put an obstacle in your way. But I was not to be turned. I remember one of my senior partners at that time was so influenced by some of the negativity around me that gave me a pretty low score in my ratings. So I went to him and said, look, this is my background. Are you telling me I'm in the wrong profession? And he said, maybe you are. You might want to look at something else. And so I was at that point. I had to make a decision. Do I stay on and prove this bastard wrong, excuse my language, or do I move on? I decided I'm going to prove this person wrong. In 6 months, this individual, at least I give him full marks for being open-minded, became my champion for partnership in the firm because I was able to demonstrate that he was being misguided by somebody, people who had. So yes, you will face. So I might have worked twice as hard initially to prove that I am as good as anybody else. But believe me, I have no complaints about it. Because by now, when I see the Canada that we live in, everybody has an equal opportunity. You come to my office, we hire 50% women. We have made a commitment that by 2020, the people that we make partners, 50% of the new admits will be women. I mean, those are the type of, I think, progressive things I'm now seeing. So, yeah, I went through a few things, but by God, it is excellent that where we are today.
So about 2 years ago, they put in a regulation, the securities went, comply or explain.
Yeah.
So what happens is, and I can tell you, I sat on these boards, 8 guys. You submit a form saying how many board members? 8, they're all male. Why are there no women? We tried, we couldn't find any. And the problem with comply or explain, and with comply or explain, the numbers have gone to 12 to 14%. Abysmal, those numbers, because you don't go comply or explain, or there's a penalty. You said Price Waterhouse is, got 50% women, high diversity, public companies. What should we do to get there?
It's a tough question because I am not personally, this is again my personal view, I am not sure about affirmative action and how far affirmative action should go. And secondly, is affirmative action detrimental? Because are you then becoming tokenism, or are you being considered as an equal and you are there because you deserve to be there rather than just because you're a woman or you're a minority of some sort? There are enough women in this country who are sufficiently qualified. The point is that this movement of making the boards more inclusive has only begun with fervor in the last 4 to 6 years. And these things do not happen in a day. If you've gone from 4 to 12%, 5 to 12%, I think what we should be saying is, by the year 2020, or like we are saying, by the year 2020, of the partners that we admit, 50% of them will be women. That does not mean that 50% of all my partners will be women, because to get there, it will take me another 5 years or 7 years.
So what should the province do?
So in my view, the province should basically say, we want to see by such and such time that 1/3 of the board consists of minorities,
And if you
including women and
if you don't, what's the penalty?
That's an interesting question, and maybe we should ask Kathleen Wynne what the penalty should be.
Well, she's gonna dance because she gets it. Your answer about no quotas, I hear from my women friends, women clients, I don't want that. That's a quota. But if you're happy going up 1% a year, it'd be 16 years till you
That's
get
why
to
I said
30%.
it should not be 1% a year. There should be an aggressive target like us.
So what should the penalty be? So say it keeps
I'm
going
not
1%.
talking about the penalty. I'll be honest with you. Maybe the penalty at the end of the day, who ends up paying the penalty? It's the shareholder. Why should the shareholder pay a penalty for a decision that the boards or the management is not able to attract the right or not able, willing to go out? So maybe the CEO should be charged with saying, okay, for every year that you lose and you don't comply with this, you get 10% of your payoff or something like that. The penalty should be with the management, and the penalty should be with the board, not with the shareholders. This whole thing that happens in the United States, where these big fines are charged by SEC, but who's paying them? It's you and I, the shareholders. It's not management. So somehow this needs to revert, the penalty needs to revert in non-compliance issues to the CEOs, to management, and the boards themselves.
Okay.
That's my view.
Politicization of professions. Like science used to be a very nonpartisan profession. In the last 10 years, it's become quite partisan because certain scientific ideas have become controversial. And I just wonder if the same thing could happen to accounting. We're seeing all these tax plans that come out, and then various public interest groups start analyzing these tax plans from, a tax and business and economic perspective, and they're starting to make these predictions about how much money people are going to make, or how much more people are going to be paid, or, for example, how many jobs will be lost if there's an increase in the minimum wage in the city. And I'm just wondering, are these, you probably heard a lot of these predictions. Are these predictions really based on accounting, or are they based on politics?
A lot is based on politics, without a doubt. A lot of this is based on self-interest and lobbying. I'm a believer that, and I think Ralph and I have briefly spoken on the phone on this, and again, this is my personal view. I believe tax laws are unfortunately, unnecessarily too complex, number one, than they need to be. It's great for people like us and Ralph. We make a lot of money because they are complex, but they can be simplified. Number two, in a country where they ask you to pay 54, 55% in taxes, it is morally wrong in the first place. Taxes, when they go beyond 45%, in my view, maybe maximum 50, I can live with. But anytime it crosses that barrier where you're paying more out of your pocket when you're working, I have a problem with that. I don't care what. Thirdly, if the government truly cares about bringing care for the people who do not have enough, they should be raising the minimum bar from $10,000 to $18,000 of a tax-free amount. Secondly, they should be creating GST rebates for the low-income earners, etc. Maybe they should be increasing the GST to 15% to meet the needs. Anyway, those are my personal ideas, personal views. I'm equally disappointed with what is happening. If you look, now again, this stays here, but if you look at some of the rules that Mono and Trudeau government wanted to bring in about taxing private corporations and all that, there's an element in there which you can say makes sense. But everything that they're trying to do and the way they're trying to do it does not make sense. So now what is happening is you've got different lobbying interests. The farmers are saying this, the private corporations of lawyers and accountants are saying this. There's a different, so everybody, it's a self-interest at the end of the day that is going to be influencing policy.
On behalf of Ryerson, I want to thank you for coming, sharing.